The Emergency Committee for Israel, Brookings, Heritage, AIPAC, WINEP, JINSA, PNAC, CNAS, the AEI, FPI, CFR, and CSP. It sure does seem sometimes like the war party's got the foreign policy debate in D.C. all locked up. But not quite. Check out the Council for the National Interest at councilforthenationalinterest.org. They put America first, opposing our government's world empire, and especially their Middle Eastern madness. That's the Council for the National Interest at councilforthenationalinterest.org. All right, y'all, welcome back to the show here. I'm Scott Horton. Next up is Jeremiah Goulka. He's a regular at TomDispatch.com. He used to be an analyst at the Rand Corporation, where he was co-author of a study about the Mujahideen-e-Cult communist terrorist cult, which is very important, but a topic for another day. And he writes about American politics and culture for a few different places. I think I saw you at the American Prospect and a couple other things there. Welcome back to the show, Jeremiah. How are you doing?
I'm real good, Scott. Thanks for having me again.
Very happy to have you here, and very happy to read about this subject. A great piece of work you put together here about Lockheed and the C-130. It's called C-130 Math. I love that there's a special kind of math named after a plane. I can't wait to find out what that means. C-130 Math and cargo of pork. What is C-130 Math, Jeremiah?
It's a slang term that picked up on Capitol Hill as lobbyists and staffers and members saw a way to really make a killing. So the C-130 Hercules is a venerable old transport plane. It's been around since the 50s, and it's gone through different additions over time, but we've seen it's been around for decades.
Well, now, wait, hold on. Describe one real quick for the people, because everybody's seen one, but let's make sure that they know what you're talking about here.
Sure, good point. It's a big, round, sort of sausage-shaped plane. It's got overhead wings, 4 propellers, 2 on each wing, kind of a snub nose. And it's real likely that listeners will have seen them parked out at civilian airports as they're taking out for landing at anywhere. I first started seeing them at O'Hare Airport because they're parked at a reserve wing there. They're out at National Guard wings. And that is a direct result of C-130 math. So what happened was in the Carter administration, the Air Force decided that it had enough of the planes, and so it didn't want any more, and it was going to start looking into a newer version of a transport plane. And Lockheed, which makes the planes, didn't really like that idea at all, and so it got its lobbyists busy, and through congressional earmarks, they got Congress to order a ton more of them than the Air Force wanted. So over 20 years after the Carter administration said no more, the Air Force asked Congress for a total of 5 of the planes. But Congress, in its wisdom, provided 256 of them. So at a ratio of 50 to 1, that's C-130 math. You get the Pentagon to ask for 1, you get Congress to provide 50 more, and if you're a military contractor, you're rolling in the dough. So 50 to 1, that's C-130 math. But, you know, what's the Air Force to do with them? They didn't want these planes, and they didn't have, the means to deal with them. They didn't want them, and so they basically just handed them off to reserve wings and Air Force reserves and Air National Guards, which then went and parked them out at their wings out at different civilian base like airports. And they basically sat there for years. So that's why I grew up actually, outside Chicago, and so whenever we'd fly through O'Hare, I'd look out the window and see them, and I was all excited, until I learned why they were there.
Yeah, it's funny because I think a lot of us, like you, we've grown up seeing these things. They're the all-purpose, gigantic plane that the Army uses. Anybody's ever seen a movie or watched the History Channel for 10 minutes after the Hitler special is over or whatever, you see this is the plane with the trucks and the tanks in the back, or the full of paratroopers jumping out, or as you say, you can turn it into a gunship, meaning have a bunch of high-powered machine guns, bristling off of every part of the plane, that kind of thing, like during the invasion of Somalia. that Special Forces used. So it's kind of a ubiquitous plane. I was actually quite surprised to hear you describe it as really quite useful for everything except flying into war zones in, say, for example, Iraq and Afghanistan. Is that right?
Yeah, well, so here's the funny thing about it. So the plane was basically fine. It did its job. It did its job well. I've flown on them before. And you kind of feel safe. They're fine planes in the older versions. The issue is the newer version, the C-130J Super Hercules, which the Pentagon didn't actually directly ask for, but Lockheed in their wisdom knew that they could just keep selling them, and they'd get Congress to buy them, and they'd get foreign militaries to buy them, and they'd get Congress to buy them to give to foreign militaries. So they put $1 billion of their taxpayer-funded profits into developing the new C-130J, which looks more or less the same as the older C-130s, but was a substantially different plane. And that thing had loads of problems. But even so, Congress kept ordering them, and then the military, in its wisdom, started choosing to order them. And that's the plane that is currently being purchased in many different versions. The military's current excitement about those planes is focused on the gunship versions and the special operations supporting versions. But like you said, they've been grounded at different times and in Afghanistan, and these days their military is trying to use the H versions rather than the J versions because they don't think the Js are safe enough to do what they wanted to do.
Amazing. And you cite an Inspector General's report all about this, too, and I guess... when did that come out, and did that make much of a splash when it did come out?
Well, the Project and Government Oversight certainly tried to make get that news out. I'm not sure how much of a splash it made. These are the sort of things that kind of pop up and off of people's radars. As we're seeing right now, like, for instance, Lockheed's F-35 fighter plane is getting a fair amount of attention for its problems, and there's been new stuff, but I think it's partly with the sequestration in mind. People are thinking of cuts, and here's this just ridiculous, pork, useless plane going that's getting nicked. I have to look actually when that IG's report came out. I think it was in the 90s.
Oh, about the Super Hercules?
Yeah, actually, no. I'll while we're talking, I'll look it up real quick.
Yeah. Well. But that sounds pretty much, close enough for government work and whatever, right? The one they've had since the 1950s is just fine. The new and improved version is a death trap. And nobody wants to fly in it. That sounds about right. Exactly.
The Inspector General Report, 2004.
I see. Okay. And then, now, you talk about that C-130 math. It got named that after the first time, but now... That was a long time ago. How many extra C-130s has the Pentagon bought beyond what they said they needed this whole time?
So
if we take what they said they needed at face value.
Oh, right, which is always such a question, right? So it was 251 extras during the 70s to the 90s. Since then, the military started asking for the planes again, and so when you look at what the Pentagon asked for in its regular budget, as well as what it asked for in its supplemental War on Terror budget, they did start asking for planes. Then there's also this thing where the branches can ask for their unfunded requirements list, which is like their Santa's wish list. And so the question is what are added on top of that. And so the math is not as extreme now because the military is asking for planes. But, for instance, even last year, the Air Force asked for 7 new planes, and the House Appropriations Committee and Armed Services Committee, they weren't as keen on only asking for 7, so they tried to put in funding to get 14 of them bought. So that's 7 more than the military even wanted. So, it's lower C-130 math, but it's still 100% more than the military even asked for.
Mm-hmm. Now, the one stat that I was hoping to find, and I'm not sure, I might have just read right past it, but the one thing that I didn't see in your article that I really want to know is like total revenues or total profits over, this many or those many years for this particular company, Lockheed Martin, or whatever
good question.
Lockheed Martin Marietta et al. is now.
Over the years, is a good question. I only put in the 2011 information from Lockheed's annual report. $5 billion in profit in 2011, $5 billion in profit in 2010, $5 billion in profit in 2009. And despite all the hoo-ha about defense cuts, theoretical cuts, and sequestration, Lockheed projected that they were going to have record profits this year.
Now, I'm not good enough to do the decimal points and all that live on the air. I don't know if you're that good at math or what, but maybe someone in the chat room can help us out with the percentages. When you say that they're spending, let's round it off to $15 million a year lobbying Congress to do what they want, and then they get to turn that around into $5 billion worth of profit a year. That's really something else. That's the number one best game in town, and all they got to do is sort of kind of churn out planes, some that'll work, some that won't.
Yeah, they've figured it out pretty well. It's really kind of incredible math. I don't have that math either, but it's more than 50 to 1, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is absolutely mind-boggling. And now, Richard Cummings did this great article for Playboy.com back in, 06 or something, called Lockheed Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, about how in the 70s they abandoned the market completely. I always forget the name of the plane, but they had a plane that was like competing with the DC-10 or something like that. And nobody wanted it. I think Delta or American bought a few of them, and then it just wasn't as good as the planes it was competing against, and so that was it. They lost out. But they had spent billions developing the damn thing. And so they said they had a big board meeting and decided that's it. We're only selling to the Pentagon from now on. And then that's it. They've just been on welfare this whole time. They're probably bigger welfare cheats than Citigroup even.
Oh, they get 1% of their work is to U.S. commercial or other customers, as they say in their annual report. 82% of the work they do, or 82% of their sales are to the U.S. government, and then 17% are to international customers, most of which are governments, and a fair chunk of that is paid for by the taxpayer under the rubric of foreign military aid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's funny, actually. You mentioned that story. That was the Lockheed L-1011 passenger plane. Wasn't working out so well, and all around the same time, Lockheed got a huge bailout from the government, which was the size and the directness of the bailout was unusual at the time. As I learned from reading Bill Hartung's excellent book on Lockheed called Profits of War, and they also, at the same time, were getting in trouble for a huge bribery scandal where they were bribing, and they had these agents who would bribe foreign officials to want to buy Lockheed planes as opposed to something else. And that bribery scandal helped lead to the creation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act by Congress.
Yeah, that's funny. And, of course, now they just shovel the money straight into the Congress and get around all those problems, right?
And it's just an amazing form of recycling of taxpayer dollars. The idea that they're being paid by taxpayer dollars to build things that theoretically they should build well, but they're not. And then they take their profits from taxpayers, put it into lobbyists' hands, who then give it right back, and lobbying and campaign donations. It's pretty ugly.
Yeah. All right. So I just got an email from a friend of the show, Robert. Who says, hey, Scott, I unloaded C-130s in 1969 in Vietnam. The airplane was already venerable in 1969. Not really huge, big enough for a few pickup trucks, 42,000 pounds cargo. So is it the C-123 I'm thinking of, or which one is the super huge one that you can fit 2 or 3 tanks in there, or is that just my imagination, or what am I thinking?
There are others, right? So there is the C-5. Galaxy, which is massive, which it was itself another huge issue of a plane that was over budget and didn't work. And guess who made that one? Yep, Lockheed. And then there's the C-17, super huge one now. And then there was this is the Hercules is a mid-sized transport plane.
I gotcha. Yeah, I like that. Venerable back in 69, which hey, that's good if the enlisted guys let it have a reputation for being a worthy aircraft. That's the kind of thing you want to listen to, Not the salesman at the top.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, of course they needed to improve it and ruin it. All right, and of course, all of this is in context of the budget, and as you say in the article, the military and their partisans, which is all of them, on Capitol Hill, screaming that any reduction in the rate of growth of spending on the Pentagon is basically national suicide, leaving us helpless before our various superpower enemies in the world.
Yep. It seems to work fairly well as a sales pitch, or at least it works well enough in Capitol Hill, which is where it matters. And you look at the numbers. I mean, it's something like half or more of the country is really quite ready to spend a lot less on national security. And of course, if you cast it in those words like you just used, and making it sound like it's all about keeping us safe at home and patriotism, then people back off. But every time you mention a specific obvious waste coming from contractors, the military, or whatever, basically you never find anyone disagreeing. I mean, even your hockiest militarist is not going to get up and say, "Oh yes, I'm really excited to fund something that doesn't work." Even the hockiest militarist wants things that work, unless they're actually in Congress or working at some place that is funded by the Pentagon or by military contractors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but even then, everybody's got to recite the mantra that they want to cut waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yeah, except when it affects them.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, they never mean close down the bases in Kyrgyzstan, because what are you trying to get into a fight with Russia and China? What are you, crazy? Get the hell out of Kyrgyzstan. Oh, and by the way, save a little bit of money too.
Right.
I don't know how much we're spending on the bases in Kyrgyzstan, but it's too much.
Exactly. Yeah, and people, it's funny as you hear that. It's because everyone's also fighting over their own little bucket. You're not going to hear people saying, in order to get out of Kyrgyzstan, we should build more aircraft carriers or something, right? Everyone says, we should build more of everything, and that way we have, of course, every arrow in our quiver. In fact, every arrow that one's never been thought of yet.
Right. Yeah, that's the good way to get compromises, is all parties get what they want, instead of everybody has to sacrifice at the same time.
Right.
Yeah. And now, here's the part that I think, I don't know, in a way it kind of blows my mind, but on the other hand, at least it's sort of consistent with his shtick, if not his actual behavior. I'm not sure I really understand it, but I'm referring to Donald Rumsfeld, and you describe him in the article as actually trying to do something about this. He had this whole thing about transforming the military into what he wants it to be instead of what it used to be, and I guess this particular plane came up on his chopping block, which is odd to me because, in fact, part of that Lockheed stock article really talks a lot about and really develops the ties between, I think it was each and every one of the members of the neocon Dick Cheney network in the first Bush Jr. administration that lied us into war with Iraq, all had ties to Lockheed. Stephen Hadley was the furthest removed, and he was a lawyer for a company that represented him. The rest of them almost all worked just directly for Lockheed at one point or another.
Oh, yeah. It's wild, and Lockheed's even bigger since Lockheed persuaded the Clinton administration to give them the better part of $1 billion in order to buy up other companies and then lay off loads of people. I mean, they've cornered the market. It's extraordinary. And so when thinking about this, it's, yes, Rumsfeld did try to axe the C-130J, but that's not like he was axing Lockheed. I mean, he still had the F-22 percolating, the F-35 percolating, and so when Gates killed the F-22 program, he did it also in favor of Lockheed's other plane, the F-35. So, and as part of the deal to cut it, to get Lockheed to go along, he had to agree to buy even more F-35s. So the J program, when Rumsfeld was going to try to, kill that and say they had enough of them, it was amazing because the Air Force got busy with Lockheed to say no, and, actually the Project and Government Oversight unearthed an award that the Defense Department Defense Contracts Management Agency, which is supposed to keep its eye on the till, it gave an award to one of its staffers for working really hard on behalf of the Air Force and Lockheed to undermine Rumsfeld's decision killing the program.
Sweet.
And the Air Force made up some fake numbers about what it would cost to close down the production line, overestimating the cost by over $1 billion. yeah, it's pretty hard to cause change on Capitol Hill.
Yeah. Well, and then didn't they decide they're going to go ahead and keep the F-22 anyway? At least it flies, unlike the F-35.
Right.
Or is that saying too much? Does it even fly, the damn thing?
Yeah, it's more, F-22 is more expensive per unit, and so on and so on. So, and of course, when they talk about cutting a program, that starts getting into, are they cutting how many future planes, as opposed to, the ones that are currently being, flown would have already been, how many that have been purchased or been agreed to be purchased. But one thing that's really crazy about this is that the F-16 is a great plane. Lockheed makes it. And Lockheed still makes it. It's not like those are, no longer made. They still make them, but only for foreign governments.
Right.
They're a lot cheaper.
Yeah, and at least from what I learned on the Discovery Channel, what now takes up the nose cone of an F-15 Strike Eagle is an entirely different thing from back when they were invented, and it's the kind of electronics package that can help the missiles under those wings kill you from way over the horizon, and that really, and I know I've talked with Air Force people who confirm this as well, that pretty much one flight of F-15 Eagles can dominate any airspace in the world. I mean, assuming they have refueling nearby or whatever, that they could kick the ass of any collection of MiGs or whatever, mostly with their software and their radar capabilities and that kind of thing, and change the whole, they already changed the nature of dogfighting where it's advantage U.S. by 1,000 to 1 anyway, and they don't need any of this crap. Their F-15s and F-16s will be fine to dominate the entire planet, at least in terms of fighter planes, from now on.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's so ridiculous about this. We have so many more planes. We have these good old planes that we've souped up that do a great job, and that's even without asking the big questions about what other planes do and what do you need the planes to do. We don't do dogfights. We haven't had a dogfight since like Korea or Vietnam. I forget which, but it's not after that. We're not worried about having to actually do guns to guns head to head with MiGs or anything. That just doesn't happen. I mean, that's not the last war. That was many wars ago. So when they're talking about the F-35 not being safe for dogfights because you can't see behind you because of the way the thing is designed, I mean, it's like you can make an ironic defense of the thing to say, well, we don't do dogfights anymore, so who cares if our new fighter plane can't do dogfights? But what do they do? I mean, things that they do we could do fine mostly with drones anyhow, and they cost hardly anything in comparison. $4 million, $9 million in comparison to $200 million plus.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, the bombing civilians where they live rather than fighting another major power. That was Gates's point about the F-22, was the F-35, at least in cartoon form, will one day be able to bomb targets on the ground, where the F-22 is only really equipped for air-to-air combat. And like you're saying, who to fight?
Yeah, and we've already got other things that can do those bombing things. And you can launch missiles from far away, because we have those too. We have bombers that can do bombing. We have special forces guys you can drop in from C-130s. I mean, none of this stuff is really, it's just necessary. It's all talking about, this notion that the Defense Department lives on with this dream that we need to be able to fight two major theater wars like World War II, as well as every, fake threat that comes up, like every version of terrorism anywhere. And even we can already do that, a lot. And we have, it's such overkill that it's mind-boggling.
All right. Thanks very much for your time, Jeremiah.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody. That is Jeremiah Goulka, formerly an analyst at the RAND Corporation, and now you can find him writing all the time over there at TomDispatch.com. Man, you need some Liberty stickers for the back of your truck. At LibertyStickers.com, they've got great state hate, like Pearl Harbor was an inside job. The Democrats want your guns. U.S. Army, die for Israel. Police brutality, not just for black people anymore. And government school, why you and your kids are so stupid. Check out these and 1,000 other great ones at LibertyStickers.com. And of course, they'll take care of all your custom printing for your band or your business at TheBumperSticker.com. That's LibertyStickers.com. Everyone else's stickers suck. Hey ladies, Scott Horton here. If you would like truly youthful, healthy, and healthy-looking skin, there is one very special company you need to visit. Dagny & Lane at DagnyandLane.com. Dagny & Lane has revolutionized the industry with a full line of products made from organic and all-natural ingredients that penetrate deeply with nutrient-rich ionic minerals and antioxidants for healthy and beautiful skin. That's Dagny & Lane at DagnyandLane.com. And for a limited time, add promo code SCOTT15 at checkout for a 15% discount. Hey everybody, Scott Horton here, inviting you to check out the Future Freedom Foundation at FFF.org. They've got a brand new website with new and improved access to more than 20 years worth of essays promoting the cause of liberty. And FFF's writers, including Jacob Hornberger, Jim Bovard, Sheldon Richmond, Anthony Gregory, Wendy McElroy, and more, aren't just good. They're the best at opposing and discrediting our corrupt overlords in Washington and their warfare, welfare, regulatory police state. That's the Future Freedom Foundation's new and improved site at FFF.org.
So you're a libertarian, and you don't believe the propaganda about government awesomeness you were subjected to in 4th grade. You want real history and economics. Well, learn in your car from professors you can trust with Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom. And if you join through the Liberty Classroom link at scotthorton.org, we'll make a donation to support The Scott Horton Show. Liberty Classroom, the history and economics they didn't teach you.
Hey y'all, Scott Horton here, inviting you to check out wallstreetwindow.com. It's a financial blog written by former hedge fund manager Mike Swanson, who's investing in commodities, mining stocks, and European markets. Wall Street Window is unique in that Mike shows people what he's really investing in and updates you when he buys or sells in his main account. Mike thinks his positions are going to go up because of all the money the Federal Reserve is printing to finance the deficit. See what happens at wallstreetwindow.com. And Mike's got a great new book coming out, so also keep your eye on writer MichaelSwanson.com for more details.